Kia ora koutou and welcome. Thanks for joining this short walkthrough of the proposed amendments to NZCS in relation to greenhouse gas emissions disclosures. I'm Judy Ryan, Technical Director Sustainability Reporting at the XRB. This session is a quick tour of what's being proposed, why we're consulting, and how you can provide feedback before the consultation closes. This is a targeted set of amendments focused on greenhouse gas emissions disclosures, particularly the Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions associated with investments in certain financial activities, and on bringing existing staff guidance on exclusions into NZCS1 as authoritative application material. I'll start with a brief overview of what we're consulting on and the key dates. There are two key elements to the proposals. First, we're consulting on amendments to the NZCS to internationally aligned Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions disclosure requirements for Scope 3 emissions associated with investments. Second, we're proposing to incorporate content from our existing staff guidance on excluding greenhouse gas emissions sources into the standard as authoritative application material, so it's all in one place and sorts consistent judgments about exclusions. The proposed application date is for reporting periods beginning on or after 1 January 2027, with early adoption permitted. Consultation closes at 5 p.m. on 29 July 2026, and we'd love to hear what you think via the online survey. Next, I'll summarise what would change in NZCS1 at a high level before we unpack the two main proposals. NZCS requires disclosure of all material greenhouse gas emissions unless there's a justified exclusion. And NZCS also requires disclosure of what's excluded and why. We're proposing two practical changes: to permit exclusions of Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions from specified financial activities, so that NZCS isn't more onerous than international requirements, and to formalise existing staff guidance on exclusions by including it as authoritative application material under NZCS1, supporting more consistent, transparent judgment making. A key point: the exclusion is a permission, not a requirement. If an entity wants to include these emissions, it can. I'll start with the proposed exclusions for specific financial activities, what they are, why we're proposing them, and how we've approached alignment, given NZCS is aligned with, but not based on, IFRS S2. This slide sets out the core proposal around permitting exclusions for specific financial activities, consistent with the way NZCS already operates. On the slide, you can see the proposed list of financial activities that an entity may exclude from its Scope 3 emissions disclosures. The intent is for this list to capture emissions associated with investments that sit outside an entity's core lending, investment, or asset management exposure, and which are not described as financed emissions in IFRS S2. I want to stress that this is a permission, not a requirement. If an entity wants to include these, it can. And we're asking in the consultation whether this list is appropriate and whether the may exclude drafting is clear and operable. Why have we taken this approach? A key difference to keep in mind is that NZCS already allows exclusions, provided an entity discloses what has been excluded and explains why the exclusion is justified. That's an existing feature of NZCS, unlike IFRS S2, which had to introduce a new form of relief. So when we looked at how to respond to the international changes, our question wasn't whether exclusions should be allowed, because they already are, but how to make it clear and consistent when exclusions are appropriate, particularly for investment-related emissions. Rather than redefining what must be measured, or introducing defined terms like financed emissions, we're proposing to be explicit about which financial activities may be excluded, consistent with the way NZCS already operates. You don't need to read this now. It's here to show where the lines are drawn internationally. To inform our description and confirm what the ISSB considered to sit outside financed emissions, we looked to the ISSB's basis for conclusions on the December 2025 amendments. The ISSB distinguishes financed emissions from other emissions associated with investments, including facilitated emissions relating to investment banking activities and insurance-associated emissions relating to insurance and reinsurance underwriting. On that basis, our proposal permits excluding emissions attributable to underwriting activities and capital market issuance activities as a practical subset of facilitated emissions, in addition to derivatives. A related question we considered is whether NZCS should add the extra disclosures the ISSB introduced alongside that relief. Our proposal is not to. When the ISSB introduced the IFRS S2 relief, it also added additional disclosures, such as describing excluded financial activities, explaining how derivatives were defined, and disclosing totals and subtotals within the emissions associated with investments. NZCS already requires disclosure and justification of exclusions, so adding these ISSB-specific disclosures would duplicate rather than add value. In the consultation questions, we specifically ask whether you agree with that approach, and if not, what additional disclosure would be decision useful and why. We're leaving investment-specific exclusions now and moving on to our second major proposal, which focuses on exclusions more generally. In August 2025, XRB staff developed and issued guidance to help preparers assess when a greenhouse gas emissions exclusion might be justified. That guidance identified 2 factors that may influence judgments about excluding emission sources: where data is unavailable and no reasonable estimate can be made, and where there is no applicable method for quantification. By proposing to include this guidance as authoritative application material, we're making it clear that it carries the same authority as the standard. Entities are required to apply it when making exclusion judgments, not treat it as optional guidance. In practical terms, this supports more consistent, transparent decisions about exclusions, and clearer discussions with auditors and users about why emissions have or haven't been included. And we're explicitly seeking feedback on whether you agree with making that guidance content mandatory within the standard. Why are we proposing an application date of 1 January 2027 and what this means in practice? The proposed application date is for reporting periods that begin on or after 1 January 2027, and we're proposing to permit early adoption. The timing matters because existing adoption relief in NZCS relating to Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions disclosures is not expected to be available for most entities from reporting periods beginning on or after 1 January 2027. We're also conscious of stakeholder feedback that NZCS has become more onerous than IFRS S2, creating uncertainty and unnecessary cost, especially for New Zealand subsidiaries of Australian groups. Aligning in time for 2027 supports international coherence and reduces divergence. The consultation asks whether you agree with the mandatory date of 1 January 2027, with early adoption permitted. Please take a look at the consultation materials, including the exposure draft referenced in the consultation document, and share your feedback via the online survey before 5 p.m. on 29 July 2026. We appreciate both supportive and critical comments. Your input helps us reach a balanced view. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this walkthrough. Mā te wā.